Caleb worked quietly among the humming machines of the space station. The walls glowed faintly with the soft lights of panels and screens, each displaying streams of numbers and graphs that only a trained eye could understand. To the casual observer, he looked like any other human aboard the station, thin and slightly hunched from long hours spent over machines. But beneath his calm demeanor, Caleb possessed a talent that no one else had noticed yet. He could feel the machines, understand their moods, and predict what they needed before they even malfunctioned. He had discovered this ability as a child, when he could fix his family's broken devices without instructions or manuals. On the station, it had grown stronger, a quiet whisper in his mind that told him which wires were misaligned or which circuits would fail. Caleb had learned early on not to talk about it. Humans were a curiosity to most alien species here, and some were quick to see anything different as a threat. It was easier to stay invisible, to let others believe he was just an ordinary technician. The day began like any other. Caleb moved between the long corridors of the station, checking machinery, tightening bolts, and adjusting panels. The other engineers, mostly aliens with long limbs and iridescent skin, worked around him, chattering in their musical language. They often glanced at him, sometimes with mild curiosity but mostly with indifference. Humans were common on this station, and they were expected to perform ordinary tasks. Caleb had never minded that. Ordinary was safe. A sudden alert sounded. The central power core, a massive structure at the heart of the station, was showing fluctuations. Caleb paused. To most engineers, it would seem minor, something to monitor and wait for. But Caleb could feel the pulse of the core in his mind, like a heartbeat skipping a rhythm. Something was wrong, something the alien engineers might not notice until it became a real problem. He crouched beside the console, letting his fingers hover over the controls without touching them. The core's signals pulsed in a pattern he could understand intuitively. He could almost hear it speak to him, a quiet, frantic whisper that made him focus. Caleb had learned to trust these moments to act before disaster struck. Yet he hesitated. The aliens were watching, and any sign that a human was solving problems beyond their understanding might bring unwanted attention. He had learned to move in silence, to fix things without acknowledgement. The thought of recognition made his stomach twist. Still, he could not ignore the warning. Not this time. Caleb leaned forward and adjusted a panel that no one else had thought to check. A faint click echoed as a circuit realigned itself. The numbers on the screen steadied. The core's pulse slowed, returning to its normal rhythm. A small smile tugged at Caleb's lips. No one noticed. The aliens had moved on to their tasks, believing the fluctuations had resolved themselves. He stood and wiped his hands on his uniform, blending back into the flow of engineers. To anyone else, he had done nothing remarkable. To Caleb, it was a victory, a small affirmation that his secret could remain safe a little longer. The station shook lightly as a larger vessel approached. Caleb glanced at the monitor. The ship's design was unlike any he had seen before, sleek and shimmering, its hull reflecting the distant stars. He had heard rumors among the alien staff about a visiting dignitary, a figure of great importance from the Queen's Council. No one knew when she would arrive, only that her presence demanded attention. The crew would prepare, panicked and meticulous, checking every system twice and running simulations endlessly. Caleb stayed in the background, watching silently, knowing that when she arrived, the atmosphere would change. The hours passed slowly. Caleb moved among the machinery, ensuring that every panel was secure and every system functional. There was a quiet satisfaction in doing work well, in solving problems without recognition or applause. It reminded him of why he loved machines. They responded to care and intuition, not authority or fear. Finally, the station doors opened with a soft hiss, and the Queen's delegation entered. Alien engineers straightened, their chatter stopping abruptly. Caleb stayed near a console, observing from a distance. He could feel the presence of the newcomers, a vibration in the air that seemed to signal intelligence, authority, and curiosity all at once. Something about it made his pulse quicken. He noticed how the delegation's eyes scanned the station, lingering on areas that should have been ordinary. One of the aliens paused near a panel Caleb had just adjusted, tapping a finger on the screen as if testing it. He felt a flicker of pride, quiet, fleeting, but undeniable. The machines were responding perfectly, and perhaps for the first time, someone important would notice that things were not as ordinary as they seemed. Caleb returned to his work, silently preparing for what the day might bring. He did not know that his quiet talent, carefully hidden for years, was about to draw attention in ways he could never have imagined. A subtle shift in the air hinted at change, and deep down, Caleb felt that his time of staying invisible might be ending. The Queen's ship docked smoothly at the station, its sleek surface reflecting the soft lights of the orbiting facility. The hum of its engines filled the air briefly before fading, leaving a sense of calm and importance behind. Caleb watched from a distance, his hands resting on a console, pretending to adjust a panel. In truth, he could feel the subtle energy from the ship, a vibration that told him this visitor was unlike anyone else he had encountered. The doors opened, and the Queen stepped out. She was taller than most aliens, her presence commanding without demanding. Her skin shimmered faintly under the station lights, changing color as if responding to her surroundings. Her eyes, large and intelligent, swept over the room with careful curiosity. Every alien engineer in the station straightened and fell silent. Even the usually indifferent crew of humans seemed to hold their breath. Caleb remained crouched beside a control console, blending into the background. He watched as the Queen's gaze moved over the systems. She paused briefly at the same panel he had adjusted earlier, tilting her head in interest. She touched a screen lightly, and Caleb felt a thrill of recognition in his mind. The Queen had noticed something that had gone unnoticed by others. The Queen moved through the station with her delegation, asking questions in her melodic language that Caleb did not understand. The aliens around her answered quickly, their voices polite and hurried. Some gave explanations showing diagrams and charts, while others simply nodded to avoid drawing attention to themselves. Caleb continued to work quietly, keeping his distance, but he could feel the energy shift as she passed near his area. Her attention lingered longer than it did on others. Caleb could sense a kind of awareness in her presence, a feeling that she was observing not only the machinery but also the people who operated it. He felt his heartbeat quicken slightly. He had always hidden his abilities, always stayed in the background, and now he worried that perhaps he could not remain invisible much longer. A sudden alert sounded in the station's central system. Caleb glanced at the screen. A minor fluctuation in one of the outer modules had triggered it. Most engineers would see it as trivial, but Caleb could feel the irregularity like a small wave in a calm lake. His fingers itched to adjust the controls to correct it, but he hesitated. The Queen was nearby. Any sign that a human was solving problems beyond their expectation could draw immediate attention. He weighed the choice quickly. Ignoring it might let the Queen think the station was flawless. Acting could reveal his secret. But the fluctuation worsened, and the module's systems began to blink erratically. Caleb exhaled slowly and stepped forward. His hands moved over the console with precision, guided by intuition more than logic. The lights steadied, the numbers normalized, and the module's hum returned to its regular rhythm. The Queen paused again, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she had sensed the correction even without understanding it. Caleb froze for a moment, hoping that no one had noticed. But then she turned her head just slightly, and a subtle expression of interest crossed her face. It was not approval, not yet, but curiosity. It was enough to make Caleb's pulse race. She walked closer, and Caleb instinctively stepped back, blending further into the shadows of the station's corridors. He could feel her studying the room, as if trying to understand the quiet patterns of those around her. Every alien engineer seemed tense, aware that their ruler's gaze was weighing every action, every word. Caleb, for once, was nervous. He had hidden his talents for so long that the idea of someone recognizing them even without words made him uneasy. The Queen paused by a console near him. Her hand hovered over the buttons, but she did not press them. Instead, she tilted her head and studied the readouts. Caleb's mind raced. She was not questioning him directly, yet her presence demanded attention. It was a test of awareness, a challenge he had not expected. Then, almost imperceptibly, she smiled. It was not a broad grin, but a quiet acknowledgement, a subtle sign that she had noticed something extraordinary. Caleb felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps she understood more than anyone gave her credit for. Perhaps she saw the value in quiet ingenuity, the kind that did not boast a harsh out but worked steadily in silence. The delegation moved on, leaving Caleb near the console. He allowed himself a small breath of relief. The Queen had not called him forward, had not questioned him aloud, but he sensed a connection. She had seen, even briefly, that someone had quietly ensured the station's systems functioned perfectly. It was a start. As the day continued, Caleb worked with extra care, adjusting panels, checking circuits, and ensuring every system ran smoothly. He felt a new kind of energy in the station, a subtle excitement that he could not place. The Queen's presence lingered in the air, like a soft vibration that made the machinery respond just a little different. Suddenly, an alarm echoed through the station. Red lights flashed along the walls and the hum of the machinery shifted into a tense vibration. Caleb froze, his instincts immediately alert. The outer life support module, which provided oxygen and temperature regulation to part of the station, was malfunctioning. The monitors showed irregular readings and the automated systems could not stabilize the environment. The alien engineers rushed toward the control panels, their long fingers flying over buttons and touchscreens. They communicated quickly, but it was clear they did not understand the problem. Their solutions were calculated, precise, yet they only seemed to slow the fluctuations rather than stop them. Caleb watched for a moment, feeling the pulse of the life support systems in his mind. It spoke to him like a gentle warning, a wave of distress he could not ignore. He hesitated. Stepping forward would reveal his abilities, the very thing he had worked so hard to keep hidden. But the fluctuation grew more serious. The temperature readings began to drop and the oxygen levels wavered. He could not let the systems fail. He had stayed in the shadows for years, but this was a moment when silence would cost more than exposure. Caleb approached the console. The alien engineers glanced at him, a mixture of curiosity and doubt in their eyes. He did not answer. He let his hands hover over the controls, feeling the subtle vibrations of the machines beneath his touch. The modules responded almost immediately, as if recognizing the familiarity in his presence. He adjusted circuits with careful movements, rerouted power, and recalibrated the systems. Numbers stabilized, lights returned to normal, and the life support module hummed evenly once more. The room fell silent. The alien engineers stared at the monitors, then at Caleb. Some looked confused, others astonished. No one had expected a human to resolve a problem they had deemed impossible in such a short time. Caleb took a small breath, his heart racing, but he did not speak. His actions had been enough. Then the Queen's voice, calm but clear, filled the comm system. "Who stabilized the outer module?" she asked. The engineers looked at one another, hesitant to speak. It was unusual for the Queen to ask questions like this. Finally, one of them muttered, It was the human. He adjusted the circuits himself." There was a pause. Caleb felt the air around him shift. He had expected questions, maybe even disbelief, but not this quiet acknowledgement from the Queen herself. The vibrations of the station seemed to carry her approval, a subtle energy that made the machinery respond with a renewed steadiness. A comm message came through, addressed to him personally. It was an invitation from the Queen to meet her in the observation chamber. Caleb's stomach tightened. He had avoided such attention all his life, yet here he was, being singled out by one of the most important beings he had ever encountered. He wiped his hands on his uniform and made his way toward the chamber, each step measured and careful. The observation chamber was vast, with a panoramic view of the stars stretching endlessly beyond the station's glass walls. The Queen stood near the center, her posture composed, eyes fixed on him. There was no anger, no accusation, only calm attention. Caleb felt a mix of nervousness and awe. He had never been in a position where his abilities were openly recognized, and yet she did not seem to judge him. "Step forward," she said, in her melodic voice. Caleb complied, feeling the hum of the station beneath his feet. "I have observed your work," she continued. "You understand machines in a way few beings do. You solve problems not by force, but by intuition and care. Tell me, how do you see the systems?" Caleb paused, searching for words. He had never explained his abilities to anyone. He could have chosen silence, but something in the Queen's presence made him feel that explanation was possible. "I listen to them," he said finally. "The machines. They tell me what they need if I pay attention. I adjust and they respond." The Queen considered this, tilting her head slightly. "You hide a great gift, yet you use it without desire for recognition. That is rare." Her words were quiet, yet they resonated in the chamber. Caleb felt a warmth of acknowledgement, not pride, but acceptance. For the first time, he realized that his talents could have a place beyond quiet repairs and unseen adjustments. She gestured toward the systems he had just fixed. "Your work has saved lives today. And yet you remain unseen by many. I will change that." Caleb's heart skipped a beat. He had spent years hiding, fearing judgment or exploitation, but the Queen did not demand anything. She only recognized. He nodded, uncertain how to respond. The Queen's eyes met his, and he felt the weight of her attention. Not threatening, but curious, respectful. It was as if she had glimpsed a potential in him that others could not perceive, a potential that could shape more than just a station, but perhaps a civilization. Caleb looked out at the stars, taking a deep breath. He understood now that hiding had kept him safe, but it had also kept him from fully realizing what he could do. The Queen's recognition did not demand immediate action, but it opened a door that he had never dared to approach before. And for the first time, he felt ready to step through it. The next morning, the station was alive with energy. Word of the life support module's sudden stabilization had already begun to spread among the crew, though most had not seen who had fixed it. The aliens whispered quietly, some curious, some skeptical. Caleb moved through the corridors with careful steps, aware of the subtle glances now cast his way. He tried to ignore them, focusing on his usual rounds, but he could feel a tension building in the air, an expectation he could not yet name. A message appeared on his console, simple and direct. Report immediately to the observation chamber. Caleb's chest tightened. The Queen's request was unusual. It was rare for her to summon anyone directly, much less a human technician. He wiped his hands on his uniform, adjusted his posture, and walked steadily through the station, trying to calm his racing thoughts. The observation chamber was empty, except for the Queen herself. She stood near the central viewport, looking out at the stars as if measuring time and space itself. When Caleb entered, she turned, her eyes meeting his. There was no fanfare, no formal announcement, only the calm authority that made her presence feel like a force of nature. "You were the one who stabilized the module yesterday," she said, her voice even, almost musical. "The system was failing and the engineers could not correct it. Yet you did, without hesitation, without seeking attention. Tell me, human, why do you work in silence?" Caleb hesitated. It was not easy to explain a life spent hiding his abilities. I always thought that if I stayed quiet, no one would notice and I would be safe. I didn't want to draw attention. I just wanted to help the systems work properly." The Queen nodded slowly, as if she understood more than the words alone could convey. "You have hidden a gift. Many would use it to gain power, to be seen. You chose another path. That choice is rare. That is why I have decided something important." Caleb felt a tightening in his stomach. He had expected recognition, perhaps, but he had not expected the weight of her attention to carry a declaration. What is it?" he asked cautiously. The Queen stepped closer, her presence commanding yet calm. "From this moment forward, you will be my engineer. You will not serve as a subordinate or an assistant. You will create, innovate, and guide the systems under my authority. Others may question it, but my decision is final. This human is my engineer." A quiet murmur passed through the observation chamber. Caleb looked around, realizing that some of the delegation had remained nearby, silently witnessing the moment. The alien engineers who had doubted him now stared with wide eyes, some uncertain how to respond. A mixture of surprise, respect, and curiosity filled the room. Caleb's mind raced. Being acknowledged by the Queen herself was overwhelming. He had hidden his abilities all his life, careful to remain unseen, and now they were recognized openly in front of an entire delegation. For a brief moment he felt exposed, vulnerable even, but the Queen's expression reassured him. She did not judge or demand. She simply recognized. You choose to trust me?" he asked, his voice quiet but steady. The Queen's eyes softened ever so slightly. "I do not choose lightly, but I have observed your work. I have seen your skill and your care. It is not a matter of trust alone. It is a matter of understanding what you can bring to this civilization. You see possibilities that others do not. That is why you will serve at my side." Caleb felt a warmth spread through him. It was not pride, not arrogance, but something deeper, a sense of belonging, of purpose, of finally being seen for who he truly was. For the first time in his life, he understood that his abilities were not a secret to fear, but a gift to be shared. The Queen gestured toward the station systems, stretching across the observation chamber like a living map. "You will help improve every system here, not because you are commanded, but because you are capable. Others will observe your methods, and slowly they will learn. Your ingenuity is now a bridge between humans and this civilization. Caleb looked at the sprawling network of panels, screens, and engines, suddenly aware of the responsibility he carried. He had always solved problems quietly, one at a time, but now his work would have impact far beyond a single module or corridor. It would influence how an entire alien civilization saw humans. As he absorbed the Queen's words, a soft hum echoed through the chamber. The system seemed to respond to the new recognition, stabilizing even further, as if acknowledging the change in direction. Caleb felt a deep connection with the station, the Queen, and the work he had chosen to dedicate himself to. The Queen spoke again, her tone calm but resolute. "Do not fear scrutiny, human. Your abilities are extraordinary and they are needed. Those who doubt will observe and eventually they will understand. You do not need to prove yourself with words or force. Your work will speak for itself." Caleb nodded, swallowing his nerves. He felt a quiet determination settle over him. For years he had hidden in silence, wary of attention. Now recognition had come not through demand, not through coercion, but through understanding, and he was ready to embrace it. He took a deep breath and looked out at the stars through the observation chamber. The vastness of space stretched endlessly, full of challenges and opportunities. For the first time, Caleb felt a certainty he had never known. His hidden abilities, once a secret kept in fear, were now his purpose. He would step forward, not for glory, but for the chance to make a difference. The Queen watched him, her expression unreadable but calm, and Caleb knew that the journey ahead would be extraordinary. He had taken the first step from silence into recognition, and nothing would ever be the same again. Caleb returned to his workspace with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The station no longer felt the same. Every hum of machinery, every flicker of a panel seemed to carry a new sense of purpose. He was no longer just a hidden technician. He was the Queen's engineer, and that title carried weight. Alien engineers who had once ignored him now watched with quiet curiosity, trying to understand the methods that had earned him recognition. The Queen's comlink buzzed softly, and her voice filled his earpiece. "Caleb, I have prepared a series of tasks for you. Each will test your ingenuity, your perception, and your ability to solve problems in ways that others cannot. Are you ready?" Caleb took a deep breath. "Yes, Your Majesty," he replied, his voice steady despite the flutter in his chest. The first challenge appeared on his console almost immediately. A section of the station's energy network was unstable. The aliens had tried conventional recalibrations, but the network still experienced unpredictable surges. Caleb studied the data, letting the patterns speak to him as they always had. He noticed subtle rhythms in the flow of energy that no one else had seen, adjusting power routing and synchronizing circuits in a sequence suggested by intuition. He gradually brought the network into harmony. The screen stabilized and the hum of energy became smooth and steady. A notification appeared from the Queen. "Well done. The next task is more complex." Caleb leaned forward as a schematic of the propulsion system appeared. The alien engineers had long considered part of it unsolvable, a combination of outdated design and over-engineered components. Many had tried to fix it only to worsen the problem. Caleb's eyes traced the lines of the diagram. Instead of seeing obstacles, he saw possibilities. He imagined how each component could interact differently, and slowly, carefully, he adjusted the system. The propulsion hum changed subtly, vibrating with efficiency. Monitors lit up with data confirming improvements in energy use, speed, and stability. The Queen's voice returned, soft but approving. "Your approach is unique. Others see problems as barriers. You see them as possibilities. That is why you are valuable." Caleb allowed himself a small, quiet smile. For years he had hidden in the shadows, but now his perspective, his human way of thinking, was being recognized as a strength. The third task was the most unusual yet. A set of alien communication arrays that had fallen into disuse because no engineer could integrate them with newer systems. The arrays had potential, but only if approached differently. Caleb studied them, feeling their subtle signals as if they were alive. Slowly, he reconnected circuits, rerouted power, and aligned their frequencies. A soft hum filled the room as the arrays began transmitting smoothly. The alien engineers watched, astonished, as the arrays came back to life. "Excellent," said the Queen. "You see what others overlook. You do not force solutions. You nurture them. That is a rare gift. As the day continued, Caleb moved from task to task. Each problem the Queen presented was more challenging, more intricate than the last. But with each success, he felt not pride but a growing sense of confidence. The alien engineers, who had been skeptical at first, began to follow his methods quietly, observing the way he approached systems with patience and intuition, rather than brute calculation. By the end of the day, Caleb stood before the Queen in the observation chamber. He was tired, but his mind buzzed with satisfaction. The station's systems were operating better than they had in years, and he knew that the impact of his work would ripple far beyond the modules he had touched. The Queen looked at him, her expression calm but filled with approval. You have done more than repair systems today. You have changed the way others perceive them, and your ingenuity has inspired confidence where there was doubt, curiosity where there was disbelief. That is the power of perspective, human. That is the power of you. Caleb felt a quiet warmth spread through him. Recognition had never been the goal of his work, but it was rewarding to see others understand the value of what he could do. For the first time, he realized that his abilities were not just a secret strength. They were a bridge, connecting humans and aliens through innovation and understanding. The Queen gestured toward the star-filled viewport. Your work will shape this station and eventually this civilization. Others will observe, learn, and grow. But remember, your greatest strength is your vision, not the praise it brings. Continue to see the possibilities others overlook. Caleb nodded, feeling the truth in her words. He looked out at the stars, imagining the infinite systems he could improve, the countless problems he could solve with patience, creativity, and intuition. For the first time, he felt that he had found his place in the universe, not hidden in silence, but recognized, valued, and ready to inspire others. He returned to his console not to seek attention, but to continue what he loved most, solving problems in ways others could not imagine, quietly transforming the station and slowly changing the way his species was seen. Caleb knew that his journey had only begun, and he was ready to embrace the challenges ahead, one ingenious solution at a time. The station had changed since the Queen's declaration. Where once humans were merely helpers, Caleb now moved through the corridors with quiet authority. His presence was subtle, yet it carried weight. Alien engineers who had doubted him began observing his methods, trying to understand how he approached problems in ways they never had. Caleb noticed their glances and subtle gestures, but he did not seek acknowledgement. His focus remained on the machines, on the flow of systems, and on the small, careful adjustments that made the station hum more efficiently. It was during a routine check of the energy grids that Caleb noticed a small but recurring imbalance. The alien engineers had ignored it, believing it too minor to matter. To Caleb, it was a symptom of a larger inefficiency that could worsen over time. He crouched near the console, feeling the energy pulses, and began making careful adjustments. Within moments, the numbers stabilized. One of the alien engineers, a tall figure with iridescent blue skin, watched silently. How does he know what to do before the system fails? The engineer whispered to a colleague. Their voice was quiet, not meant for Caleb, but he heard it. He allowed a small smile but did not speak. Observation, patience, and intuition had always been his strengths. He did not need to explain. The results spoke for themselves. Word of his success spread quickly. Alien engineers began approaching him with questions, asking how he managed to stabilize systems others could not. Caleb answered simply, never boasting but always guiding. Pay attention to how the system moves, he would say. Listen to it and it will tell you what it needs. The Queen observed all of this from her chamber. She had been monitoring the station's overall performance, noting the subtle shifts in efficiency and the growing respect for Hugh. Man ingenuity, she was pleased. The presence of a human engineer who could inspire and teach without coercion was rare in her experience. Caleb's quiet guidance was creating a ripple effect, changing the culture of the station. Caleb continued to work tirelessly, moving from module to module, adjusting systems, and quietly mentoring those who asked. Alien engineers who had once been skeptical now followed his example, integrating his methods with their own. The station became smoother, more efficient, and surprisingly harmonious. Even minor malfunctions that had plagued the station for months disappeared under his attention. One day, the Queen called him to the observation chamber. She gestured to a cluster of young alien engineers who had gathered nearby, imitating his hand movements as he adjusted a small console. "Look at them," she said. "They are learning from you, Caleb. You are not only solving problems but teaching others to see as you do. That is rare in any species." Caleb watched the young engineers, feeling a quiet pride. This was different from recognition. It was influence, a ripple of change that could last far beyond his own work. The Queen's words reminded him that his talent was not just for fixing machines. It could inspire understanding, creativity, and cooperation among species. As the days passed, the station became a place where humans and aliens worked together in a new rhythm. Where there had once been hesitation and doubt, there was curiosity and experimentation. Caleb noticed alien engineers approaching him not with fear or suspicion, but with questions and ideas. They were learning to think differently, to observe more closely, and to solve problems without rushing. Caleb's influence extended even to the Queen's strategic decisions. She began consulting him on larger station projects, from optimizing energy flow to designing new communication arrays. His input was measured, thoughtful, and always practical. The Queen respected his perspective, not only for the solutions he offered, but for the calm, patient way he approached challenges. For the first time, Caleb felt that his abilities had a broader purpose. He had once hidden in silence, fearing attention or exploitation. Now he realized that his quiet talent could transform not just a station, but the way an entire civilization viewed humans. His work was a bridge between worlds, showing that intelligence, patience, and creativity could be as powerful as any strength or technology. At the end of a long day, Caleb paused in a corridor, watching the sun rise over the planet below the station. The alien engineers moved efficiently through the halls, now guided by curiosity rather than strict routine. The systems hummed with a steady, reliable rhythm. Caleb felt a deep satisfaction, not from recognition but from knowing that his approach had changed the station for the better. The Queen's voice came gently through the comm link. "Your influence is growing, Caleb. Others are beginning to see the value of perspective, patience, and quiet ingenuity. You have done more than repair systems. You have inspired a culture of understanding. That is a rare achievement." Caleb nodded quietly. He had never sought recognition, but he understood now that true impact was measured not in applause but in change. He turned back to his console, ready to continue the work he loved, observing, adjusting, teaching, and quietly transforming the station into something greater than it had ever been. For the first time, he felt fully at home among the stars, confident that his abilities, once hidden in silence, were now a guiding force for those who were willing to learn. Caleb stood at the center of the station's main hub, surrounded by the steady hum of machinery and the quiet chatter of engineers. The transformation he had quietly guided over the past weeks was now clear. Systems that had once been temperamental now operated smoothly, and alien engineers moved with confidence, combining their technical knowledge with the human approach of observation and intuition. The Queen had summoned him to the observation chamber once more, but this time the air was different. There was no tension, no expectation of judgment. Instead, the atmosphere carried a calm sense of accomplishment, as if the station itself acknowledged the change Caleb had brought. He followed the smooth corridors, his hands brushing lightly against the panels he had worked on so often, feeling the steady pulse of energy beneath them. The Queen was waiting by the viewport, looking out at the planet below, its oceans glinting in the sunlight. She turned when Caleb entered, her expression calm yet warm.
"You have done more than I expected, human," she said.
"You have improved the station, yes, but more importantly, you have shown others a way to think differently. You have bridged a gap between our species." Caleb nodded quietly. "I never wanted attention, I just wanted to help the systems work. And yet your help has become something much greater," the Queen replied. "You have inspired cooperation, curiosity, and understanding. You have shown that intelligence is not only about knowledge, but also about perception, patience, and creativity. That is a rare gift." He looked around the chamber. Several young alien engineers had gathered at the edges, observing silently. Some had begun mimicking his methods in minor adjustments, learning to approach systems with a balance of care and intuition. Caleb realized that this was his true legacy. It was not in the modules he fixed or the panels he adjusted, but in the minds he had influenced. One of the engineers stepped forward and asked, Human Caleb, may we ask how you think about the systems? How do you see what others cannot? Caleb paused, considering how to answer simply. I watch and listen, he said finally. Machines have patterns, rhythms. If you pay attention, you can see where they struggle and where they flow. You adjust gently, guide them rather than forcing them. That is how I know what to do. The engineer nodded thoughtfully and others watched in silence, absorbing every word. Caleb realized that teaching had become as important as repairing. He could guide not only machines but the people who worked with them, shaping a culture that valued patience, observation, and thoughtful problem-solving. The Queen moved closer. Your influence is not limited to the station, she said. Other stations, other fleets will see what you have done here. Humans will no longer be underestimated. You have proven that strength is not always in size or firepower. It is in the mind that sees what others cannot. Caleb felt a quiet pride, but it was different from what he had expected. He had always hidden in silence, fearing judgment, fearing exploitation. Now his abilities were recognized not as a tool for personal gain, but as a bridge between civilizations. His gift had become something greater than himself. He spent the next hours walking through the station, observing the systems, answering questions, and offering small guidance. Alien engineers approached him without hesitation now, discussing ideas openly and experimenting under his gentle direction. He noticed that even the most skeptical had begun to see value in the human way of thinking. The station thrived on collaboration, not authority, and Caleb had quietly led the change. By the evening, the stars stretched endlessly outside the station's windows, reflecting the calm energy within. Caleb paused and looked at them, thinking of how far he had come, from hiding his abilities in fear to standing recognized, respected, and relied upon. The Queen joined him at the viewport, standing silently, letting him take in the view. You have done well, human, she said softly. Your work will echo through this civilization for years. Others will follow your methods, but it will be your vision that guides them. That is your true legacy. Caleb smiled faintly, feeling a quiet contentment. He had never sought glory or praise. He had only wanted to help. Yet in helping, he had changed not only the station but the perception of his species. Humans, once underestimated, could now be seen as creative, perceptive, and capable of bridging worlds. As he turned back to the central hub, Caleb noticed young engineers adjusting a complex energy panel, their hands moving confidently, guided by the lessons he had imparted. The station thrummed with smooth efficiency, alive with collaboration and understanding. He felt a deep sense of purpose. This was why he had hidden for so long, not to avoid attention, but to prepare for a moment when his skills could truly matter. The Queen watched him, her expression calm but approving. You are ready for any challenge now, human, and yet you will continue to teach, to guide, and to inspire. That is the path of true greatness. Caleb nodded silently, letting the hum of the station fill his senses. He had begun in silence, hiding his abilities from a galaxy that might not have understood. Now he stood at the center of recognition and respect, his ingenuity shaping systems, minds, and cultures. He understood that his journey was only beginning, but for the first time he was ready. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the station, and Caleb felt a quiet certainty. His abilities, once hidden, had become a bridge between humans and aliens, between problem and solution, between potential and achievement. He smiled to himself, knowing that in the vastness of space, human ingenuity had finally found its place.